If you want to move to the next slide, I'll read the slides. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. You can read the full notice for your rights and protections at www.boston.org/MPO_NO_DISCRIMINATION. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After a roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or on the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. If you are on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact Sean Rourke via the chat box at srouke@ctps.org or 857-702-3705. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant, with exceptions, with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact Sean Rourke of the MPO staff at srouke@ctps.org or 857-702-3705. Next item on the agenda is introductions. I'm David Moeller, represent Secretary Gina Fiendake. Call the roll.
Mass DOT seat 2.
I do not see either John at the moment.
You're not seeing John Romano either?
No.
Okay. I'll move to MBTA.
Jillian Linnell, representing General Managering.
Massport.
I do not see Sarah Lee.
Okay. MAPC.
Good morning, Eric Barassa with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
MBTA Advisory Board.
Good morning, Amira Patterson, representing the MBTA Advisory Board.
Advisory Council.
Leonard Dickens here on behalf of the Advisory Council.
City of Boston BTD. I think I saw Matt come into the meeting.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, great. Sorry. Here. Matthew Moran, representing Mayor Wu.
Thank you. City of Boston BPDA.
Jim Fitzgerald with BPDA, representing Mayor Wu and City of Boston.
At-large City of Everett.
Eric Molinari, representing Mayor Carlo D. Maria and the City of Everett.
At-large City of Newton.
David Kozas, representing Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller and the City of Newton.
At-large Town of Arlington.
Good morning, John Alessi, representing Town of Arlington and Town Manager Sandy Pooler.
At-large Town of Brookline.
Morning all, Rob King, representing Town of Brookline, Town Administrator Charles Carey.
Inner Core Committee, City of Somerville.
Sorry, I guess I was still muted. Tom Bed, City of Somerville, representing Mayor Katiana Valentine in the Inner Core.
Thank you. Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, Town of Acton.
Good morning, Kristen Guichard here representing the Magic Region for Acton Select Board member Dean Charter.
Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham.
Dennis Giambetti, represented Metro West Region and Mayor Charles Siski of Framingham.
North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly.
Darlene Nguyen, representing the North Shore Task Force and the City of Beverly.
North Suburban Planning Council, Town of Burlington.
No Melissa Tentaklis.
Okay. South Shore Coalition, Town of Hull.
And also no one from Hull at the moment.
All right. Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, Town of Medway.
No Peter Pelletier.
Great. And Three Rivers Interlocal Council, Town of Norwood, Neponset River Regional Chamber.
Good morning, Tom O'Rourke, Town of Norwood, representing the Trek subregion.
Great. And our ex officio members, Federal Highway Administration.
Don't see anyone from FHWA.
Great. And Federal Transit Administration.
And also no one from FTA.
All right.
FHWA, sir. Can you unmute Joshua Barber?
Hey, everybody. Joshua Barber here, representing Federal Highway Administration.
Great. Thank you. And I believe that calls the roll.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the chair report. I don't have one at this time, so we'll go directly to Tegan for the Executive Director's report.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, everybody. For my report today, I will cover the usual areas. First, I wanted to remind everyone of our ongoing recruitment. We do have 2 postings right now for MPO staff that you are already aware about, that we talked about in prior meetings, and that's a principal data analyst and a travel demand modeler, someone who can help us work on applying our travel demand model. And then also a manager of the renamed multimodal planning and design group. So those 2 continue to be posted. And then we have a new posting for a position that is a senior transportation planner that is within the multimodal planning and design group that will have a freight focus. So if you know anyone in that area of expertise, please do send them our way. And the next slide, I have one brief engagement update. And that was that on Tuesday, the MPO held a joint meeting with Mass DOT as part of the public comment period for the state's capital investment plan. And just to always kind of refresh people what these plans are, this is the 5-year investment plan for the state, inclusive of all of the funding sources, state, federal, and other funds that the state uses. So right now, the SIP being reviewed is the 24 to 28 SIP. And just to give a highlight at the meeting, both MPO staff and MassDOT staff answered questions from the attendees about the types of projects that are appearing on both the SIP and the TIP. And then the next slide for today's agenda, we have some action items. We do have a continuation of, I'll actually say this in a different order than you see on the slide, but we will have a continuation of activities for releasing for public comment or endorsing amendments. So the 2 listed here are the federal fiscal year 23 to 27 TIP Amendment 5 and Amendment 8. We will also expect today a walk-on of another 23 to 27 TIP Amendment 9, and that would be to release it for public comment. And then as we are at the conclusion of the new TIP, the federal fiscal year 24 to 28 TIP, at the conclusion of the public comment period, we will ask you to consider and endorse this new 24 to 28 TIP. We will also be presenting to the board for your approval the first bullet item here, which is the operating budget for the staff to the MPO for the next state fiscal year. Then the next slide. The next meeting is on June 15th at 10 a.m. You should have received some emails letting you know that we will be holding this meeting in the State Transportation Building boardroom at 10 Park Plaza. Some of you will be familiar with this room. For some of you, it may be newer, but please do let us know if you are able to attend in person. There is an option to attend virtually as well, especially for members of the public. But we are hoping that as many board members as possible can attend so that there can be some networking and introductions and reintroductions after we have been meeting virtually for so long. And to help facilitate that, we will also have some light refreshments available in advance of the meeting outside of the boardroom. And please remember that food and drink can't be brought into the boardroom, so we will have a drink parking lot as we did before, just outside of the room, so you can still enjoy your coffee during breaks. At that meeting, again, just to sort of give it a little bit of a teaser, it will be a very important meeting. So again, we hope you can be there. That will be our chance also to ask you to vote to release both the new long-range transportation plan and the fiscal year 24 UPWP for public review. There will also be some more voting on amendments, at least one amendment. But then we also plan to talk about 2 core document supporting the governance and operations of the MOU of the MPO. And that is both the operations plan, which the A&F committee have been working hard to develop a draft of over the last more than a year. And then also we will discuss with you some potential changes to the MOU that guides the MPO's work based on the recommendations and corrective action in our last federal certification review report. So all of that is on the docket for June 15th, and we'll keep you posted as to what that final agenda ends up looking like. And that, Mr. Chair, is all I believe I have.
Thank you, Tegan. I should also note that I believe Tegan Joy Singh from Federal Highway, the new division administrator, will also be in attendance at that meeting. So
We do anticipate that.
Hello and introduction of herself. So if you can be there, that would be great. Thanks, Tegan. Next item on the agenda is committee chairs reports. Are there any at this time? Derek Cravat.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to let everybody know that the next Unified Planning Work Program committee meeting will be held a week from today, June 8th at 1 p.m. At that time, we'll be reviewing the draft document for the federal fiscal year 2024 UPWP, and we'll be proposing that the committee recommend the MPO release that for public comment at the meeting on June 15th. So hope to see everyone there, and just wanted to let folks know June 8th is our next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. And Tegan, I'm remembering this right? We're changing the agenda order.
Yes,
so
please.
Just in advance for everybody to know, we are moving the action item on the operating budget to the end of the agenda to accommodate Brian Kane's schedule. Unfortunately, meeting came up he could not miss, and it conflicted with the beginning of this meeting, so he hopes to be here. So we're moving that to the bottom of the agenda. Did I take public comments or did I skip right over it? I can't remember if I asked for public comments. If I didn't, is there anyone from the public who would like to comment at this time? Seeing and hearing none. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Regional Transportation Advisory Council report. Lynn Diggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I can sympathize with how easy it is to like, how hard it is to remember, like, what did I know was on the agenda? Anyways, for our we have not had meetings since our last board meeting here, but our next meeting, the 14th, is going to feature Betsy Harvey as the headliner, who is going to give us a preview of the next iteration of the coordinated public transit human services transportation plan. And it's a 4-year plan, very similar to the LRTP. It rides very much under the radar, but in my opinion, it is a very important plan, especially for those who need it, people with mobility issues and elderly. So she's going to be giving us a preview of that, and we'll be gearing up to make our comments on the UPWP and the TIP that will be released on the next day, the 15th. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Next item on the agenda is the minutes of April 20th. Can I get a motion in a second to approve the minutes? And please state your name for the record when making the motion. Amira Patterson.
Amira Patterson, moving to approve the minutes for April 20th.
Thank you. Eric Barassa.
I will second that motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Are there any comments, changes, questions, or suggestions from the members? Seeing none, please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
Jillian Linnell,
Yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Amira Patterson,
Amira Patterson, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Matt Moran,
Matt Moran, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Eric Molinari,
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Okay, motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Skipping over action item 8 for now. Action item number 9 is the 2023-2027 amendment number 5. Whenever you're ready, Ethan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everybody. My name is Ethan Lapointe. I am the Transportation Improvement Program Manager for the Boston Region MPO. This presentation will start off with a review and conclude with an endorsement of TIP Amendment 5. If we can go on to the next slide. Just for a summary and review of Amendment 5, for the federal fiscal year 2023 program, Amendment 5 proposed a cost increase to the Wilmington Bridge replacement for Butters Row over MBTA. I will circle back to that project, but also include new design earmarks for the Border to Boston trail segments in Peabody and Salem, and a new design earmark for a rail grade crossing improvement at the Broadway commuter rail crossing in Wakefield. There was also funding adjustments for projects for the Metro West RTA. If we can go on to the next slide, please. As part of Amendment 5, there were no public comments received during the 21-day public comment period, which lasted from May 5th to May 26th. If we can go on to the next slide, I would like to note real quickly, before staff requests the board vote to endorse Amendment 5 to the federal fiscal years 2023-27 TIP, that there was a very small change on that Butters Row Bridge project between what was presented at the, I believe, May 4th MPO board meeting and what will be incorporated based on project cost. The project cost for this project increased from what is anticipated with this amendment from $16.43 million up to $16.46 million between the difference from the 100% design submission and the plan specifications and estimates submissions there. Just a $30,000 increase in difference from what was initially presented, but just wanted to highlight that. With that, staff are requesting that the board votes to endorse Amendment 5 to the 23-27 TIP.
Thank you, Ethan. Are there any questions for Ethan? Amira Patterson, do you have a question or are you going to make a motion?
I do have a question, Mr. Chair. Taking a look at the document for Amendment 5, it's specifically the Wilmington project. So what are we removing to balance the $6 million difference?
So there is no, to my understanding, there is no removal to accommodate that increase, and there is no further scope adjustment as part of this additional $30,000 change, which I just referred to. There is funding held in reserve to cover contingencies within the state highway program, which facilitates this increase. That's my understanding, at least.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Any other questions? Seeing none, can I get a motion in a second? Excuse me. Motion in a second to approve this as presented today with the $30,000 increase. Eric Barassa. Is there a second?
I will second whoever made the motion.
Yeah, who moved? Can you state your name for the record for our staff?
It was Dennis, sorry.
Thank you, Dennis. So moved by Dennis Giambetti, seconded by Eric Barassa. Please call the roll. Thank you, Dennis.
David Moeller.
Yes.
I believe we have John Bouchard on the phone line. Is he able to unmute himself?
John Bouchard is on. Apologize, I'm on the phone, so I wasn't able to unmute myself. I vote yes.
Thank you. Jillian Linnell.
Yes.
Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, yes.
Amira Patterson.
Amira Patterson abstain.
Leonard Diggins.
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Matt Moran.
Matt Moran, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald.
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Eric Molinari.
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kozis.
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi.
John Alessi, yes.
Rob King.
Rob King, yes.
Tom Bent.
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard.
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti.
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Wynn.
Darlene Wynn, yes.
And Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item, and for the next item, John Romano just got in, I think, into the room, so we'll call on him next time. I believe it's amendment number 8. Is that right, Ethan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We're just going through the backup slides there for Amendment 5.
Yeah.
Again, my name is Ethan Lapointe. I'm the Transportation Improvement Program Manager, sticking with the federal fiscal years 2023 to 27 TIP. The purpose of this presentation is to cover a request for a release for public comment on Amendment 8 to the TIP. Amendment 8 includes one proposed change, which is a cost increase and also delay for project 607342. This is in Milton and entails intersection improvements at the intersection of Route 28 Randolph Road and Chickatobit Road. If we can go on to the next slide, just to look in more detail as to what that entails. The Milton intersection improvements at Randolph Avenue and Chickatobit Road project is in the federal fiscal year's 2023 statewide highway program. The project cost is being increased as a result of additional needs identified through the project design process and progress on that design from its current budget of $7.06 million to $9.11 million. This project is also being delayed to federal fiscal year 2024 as the additional design needs identified through the progress of design warrant additional permitting and right-of-way considerations that are adjusting its readiness schedule. With that, this project will be delayed into federal fiscal year 2024, but still remain in the statewide highway program. It also appears already in the federal fiscal year 2024-28 draft TIP as well. This has already been accounted for there. With that, if we can move on to the next slide, staff are requesting that the board votes to release Amendment 8 for a 21-day public comment period, with comment commencing on June 2nd, tomorrow, and anticipated to conclude on June 23rd, 2023. With that, I'd be happy to open the floor to any discussion or vote.
So Ethan, I have a question about something Tegan mentioned earlier. Does MassDOT have a walk-in item, and are we doing it as a separate amendment, or are we doing it as part of this amendment?
Yes, so the subsequent item after this is a walk-on Amendment 9 for the 23-27 TIP. The reason being is that while this amendment is only one item, and Amendment 9 would also be only one item, this additional item came in after the 48-hour open meeting law requirement for publishing materials. And therefore, there was insufficient time to give board members the ability to review that line item. So instead, it's being treated as a separate action.
Okay. Thank you, Ethan. Are there any questions for Ethan on amendment number 8? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to release it for a 21-day public review process? Please state your name for record when making the motion. Eric Barassa.
I'll make a motion to send this for public comment.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Dennis Giambetti, second.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
David Muller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Jillian Linnell,
Jillian Linnell, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Amira Patterson,
Amira Patterson, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Matt Moran,
Matt Moran, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Eric Molinari,
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bennett, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ethan, do you want to do the walk-in amendment 9 now, or like how are we doing that? When do you want to do that?
I think it is actually the next slide. So I think it, yep, there we are.
All right, there you go, Ethan.
All right, so for the third and I'm hoping final amendment to the federal fiscal year's 23-27 TIP for this presentation today, I'd like to discuss Amendment 9 to the TIP. Just like Amendment 8, this is a single line item amendment for the federal fiscal year's 2023 program. This amendment proposes the programming of a federal fiscal year 2023 federal community project funding, which is often referred to as an earmark, to support electric vehicle charging infrastructure in Cambridge. This is a new project. If we go on to the next slide and the one after that, specifically, this is for the Cambridge Neighborhood Electric Vehicle Charging Infrastructure Project for Cambridge residents. This is a new project that programs a $1 million earmark with $250,000 in local matching funds to expand the publicly accessible electric vehicle charging network in Cambridge. This was appropriated within the federal fiscal year 2023 earmarks for the United States House, specifically from Representative Presley's district. With that, if we can go on to the next slide, staff are requesting that in tandem with Amendment 8, the board votes to release Amendment 9 for a 21-day public comment period. Just as with Amendment 8, public comment would commence tomorrow, June 2nd, and conclude June 23rd of 2023. With that, I'm happy to open the floor to questions.
Thank you, Ethan. Are there questions from the members? Seeing and hearing none, can I get a motion in a second to release this for a 21-day public review process? Lynn, did you have a question or are you going to make the motion?
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Motion has been made. Is there a second? Eric Barassa.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded to release this for a 21-day public review process. Please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Jillian Linnell,
Jillian Linnell, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Amira Patterson,
Amira Patterson, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Matt Moran,
Matt Moran, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Fitzgerald, yes.
Eric Molinari,
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Rob King,
King, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And now to conclude the Ethan LaPointe show, it is the approval of the FY 2024 to 2028 tip. Ethan, whenever
Yes.
you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And last but not least, this is an action item for the federal fiscal years 2024 to 28 tip for the Transportation Improvement Program. This is the endorsement of the draft tip. If we can go on to the next slide, please, to give a brief overview on today's presentation. For the last time, there will be a tip development timeline review for the dates and action items that were part of the 2024-28 tip development period, along with a total overview of the contents of the Transportation Improvement Program for the next 5 fiscal years. There will also be any discussion there with regard to some of the public comments that were received during the public comment period for the draft tip, and concluding with a vote to endorse the tip in its current form. As part of this presentation, if we can go on to the next slide, staff provided a packet of written public comments, including letters of support and a summary table of all public comments received with draft responses, include in the tip as Appendix C, Table C2 within that appendix. There's also a public review draft of the federal fiscal year's 24-28 tip, which is a more complete version than what was initially presented at the April 20th meeting and represents the final figures, numbers, and substance of the Transportation Improvement Program. If we can go on to the next slide, just to kind of take a look back and look at the past 9 months in review, tip development started in earnest at the start of the autumn with October, with how-to meetings on the tip and one-on-one meetings between staff and municipalities. The purpose of these meetings being to inform the development of a draft universe of projects for presentation to the MPO board in November, and in tandem in November, the release of applications for project funding for the federal fiscal year's 24-28 tip. This would then inform a conclusion of the application period towards the end of December, and the commencement of project scoring after the holidays. This project scoring period for those projects that were applied for construction funding would last for several months, even into the spring. And while that was happening in February, were the presentation of project readiness updates for currently programmed projects and funding updates as well. Then with the conclusion of project scoring was the presentation of final scores to the MPO, with more recently those scores informing the development of project scenarios, the selection of projects for what should be funded. This then culminated in the approval of a draft tip for public review at the April 20th meeting. And lastly, today is the endorsement of that final federal fiscal years 2024 to 28 tip. With that, if we can go on to the next slide to begin looking and reviewing the tip in summary. The Transportation Improvement Program, while often discussed as containing that $700 million shown in light blue of regionally prioritized funding, actually amounts to a total portfolio of projects of $6.34 billion. This includes nearly $1.6 billion in MassDOT's highway project funding and nearly $4 billion in MBTA projects, in addition to $65 million in projects for regional transit authorities, namely Metro West RTA and the Cape Ann Transportation Authority. The tip represents all $6.34 billion of funding here. So while many of the discussions as part of the development of the tip focus on that $700 million, the decisions made surrounding amendments and priorities and the other components of the tip really reflect this holistic assessment of all projects contained for the 97 cities and towns in the region. With that, just to circle back, I guess, to the regional target funding on the next slide, this new federal fiscal year 24-28 tip includes the allocation of $150 million of that regionally prioritized target funding to 21 new projects in that 5-year time band. In advance of the next tip, being 25 to 29, there are 3 new transit modernization projects, in addition to a federal fiscal year 25 project design pilot and that introduction of a bike share support program, with these 3 line items heavily informing the development of subsequent tips, and will also inform the application period coming this November for that subsequent tip. The 24-28 tip also entailed the delay of 8 projects with no accelerations on currently programmed projects in the 23-27 time band, but continued investment and also increased investment on major regional capital projects, including Boston's reconstruction of Rutherford Avenue, Somerville's McGrath Boulevard construction, and Lynn's rehabilitation of Western Avenue projects, which have advanced construction funding between multiple tip years in the outer years of the 5-year time band, namely federal fiscal years 26 through 28. With that, if we can move on to the next slide, just to review all tip projects within the regionally prioritized time band, there are 57 projects within that $697.5 million that are funded, in addition to a $26 million set aside that is held in there for unprogrammed funding. This includes 6 bicycle and pedestrian connections projects, 17 community connections projects, of which 10 are new to this tip, 22 projects in total for complete streets improvements, and 5 projects for intersection improvements. There are also 3 major infrastructure projects, 4 transit modernization projects, 3 of which are new, and as stated, set aside funds for transit modernization in the amount of $21.5 million and the unprogrammed balance for potentially new projects or contingency of $26 million. It should also be noted as well, as we move on to the next slide, that between these different investment programs is some overlap in the kinds of improvements and scopes that are funded. While Complete Streets represents the largest allocation of funding within all the investment programs at 47.1%, the next largest, being major infrastructure at 17.9%, is largely defined by the ability of the projects to add capacity, and often large complete streets projects like Rutherford Avenue may be classified as a major infrastructure project, or vice versa. Moreover, some complete streets projects also largely focus on intersection improvements and safety for all roadway users, perhaps expanding the scope beyond a single intersection into a complete comprehensive corridor enhancement. The next largest investment category is transit modernization at 12.5% of allocation and bicycle and pedestrian investments at 9.5%. Again, bicycle and pedestrian investments often appear within the complete streets and major infrastructure categories, and this program often funds not only shared use paths on existing roadways or improvements to pedestrian enhancements like sidewalks, but also rails to trails and greenway projects, of which some were newly funded in the 24-28 TIP. And last but not least is 2.8% for community connections projects for first and last mile connections, and also a 3.7% unprogrammed balance for the TIP. With that, if we can go on to the next slide, just to look at a very high level as far as all funding across all 5 years of the TIP. And the next slide, just to kind of highlight this, since this is a little tricky to look at, the TIP is broken out in its funding across 5 federal fiscal years between 2024 and 28, with funding apportioned for each of those years. The top row illustrates the regional target funding available, with the second being programmed funds and remaining being unprogrammed funds. This slide shows the near-term years of the TIP, federal fiscal year 2024 to 2025, with funding often held in the near terms for contingency on near-term funded projects. For these years, there was nearly $130.6 and $128.4 million of available funding between federal fiscal year 24 and 25 respectively, with programmed amounts of approximately $127 million and $126 million. This leaves remaining unprogrammed funds in near-term years of the TIP at $3.65 million and $2.45 million. Again, this funding often being used for contingency in the event of a cost overrun on a project. On the next slide, to look at the middle year of the TIP being federal fiscal year 2026. This specifically is a year that lies between the outer years, which tends to be funding for new projects, and the near term that tends to be where contingency occurs. Often projects within federal fiscal year 2026 may shift, and with available funding of approximately $125.3 million and $124.7 million programmed against that, there remains unprogrammed funding availability of only $618,446 for that year. This is constrained availability, but the TIP is a living document that is amended and changes as projects needs to change. So this number is absolutely subject to change. With that, for the last 2 years, or the outer years of the 5-year time band, comes federal fiscal year 2027 to 2028. For these years, there was additional regional target funding available of $155.1 million in federal fiscal year 2027 and $158.1 million in federal fiscal year 2028. This was largely the result of a suspension of grant anticipatory note or debt service payments by MassDOT, which allowed for additional regionally prioritized funding to be disseminated to MPOs throughout the state of Massachusetts. This led to regional target programming allocations of $144 million in federal fiscal year 2027 and $149.9 million in federal fiscal year 2028. There are remaining balances of $11.1 million in federal fiscal year 27 and approximately $8.2 million in 2028. With that, if we move on to the last slide to show the 5 years in review, the TIP has a total funding availability of $697,544,788 in regionally prioritized funding. There is $671,508,348 of that funding programmed, leaving a total funding for allocation in future fiscal years and future TIPs of $26,036,440. So that's a lot of numbers, but if we go on to the next slide, we can look more at the public engagement section of the TIP. Engagement for the TIP include multiple different vectors to address the public and also engage them within the development process for changes that may be requested as part of the federal fiscal years 24 to 28 TIP. This include a 21-day public comment period that spanned from April 26th to May 17th, and also 2 virtual TIP open houses, the first of which was at May 8th at 6 p.m. and May 11th at 2 p.m. There were also direct social media postings on a variety of platforms and direct stakeholder outreach to project proponents, advocacy groups, and other community members. On the next slide, there were actually 9 public comment letters received during the comment period. Specifically, there were projects that received comment letters relating to Belmont's Community Path, Norwood's intersection improvements at Route 1 and University Ave and Everett Street, Swampscott's rail trail construction project, and in Weston, the reconstruction on Route 30 project. In addition to these four, which are currently programmed in the federal fiscal year 23 to 27 TIP, there was also a comment on the Cochituate Rail Trail project in Natick, which is a newly programmed project that was received from the town of Natick Select Board as well on May 4th. With that, to dig deeper into some of these comment letters on the next slide, one letter was a petition, with the only petition submitted as part of this public comment period for the reconstruction on Route 30 project in Weston, which is project ID 608954. This project was funded new to the TIP in 23 to 27 and received 111 signatures in opposition to that. This amounts to 119 total commenters during the public comment period, in addition to letters from the Regional Transportation Advisory Council and also from various select boards and political and advocacy groups throughout the Commonwealth. With that, the focus on various comments and letters received by MPO staff relating to the TIP include a variety of topics and themes, some specifically looking at the TIP document, the project's substance or formatting, questions as to navigation there, or the expansion of transportation equity investments, mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions, and protection of air quality. There was also a major focus on the MBTA's expansion projects or long-term ambitions for capital investment by the MBTA, including investment in bus facilities, commuter rail electrification, or heavy rail and other transit expansion, including the Red-Blue connector. There was also questions as to the MPO, MassDOT, and MBTA's project selection methods, not only within the TIP, but also the statewide transportation improvement program and capital investment plans for both MassDOT and the MBTA. Again, there were also questions as to the extent to which the TIP limits greenhouse gas emissions and protects air quality, and more direct questions related to the methodology applied by MPO staff for project selection and scoring in those spring months of the TIP development period. With that, on the next slide, staff are requesting that the MPO vote to endorse the federal fiscal years 2024 to 28 TIP after consideration of the public comments that were submitted on the draft. With that, I'd be happy. We do have one slide after this, actually. Apologize. With that in mind, when this vote is conducted, there may be some additional updates to the TIP before the final posting after this vote occurs. Namely, following endorsement will be the addition of certification statements as to greenhouse gas reductions and the overall TIP document itself. There will also potentially be updates to Appendix G, Table G2, which refers to operations and maintenance projects for the various implementing agencies for transportation projects in the region, and minor adjustments to any text, spelling, or context throughout the document. With that said, the document as presented to the board today is substantially complete and finalized. With that, I'd be happy to open the floor to discussion.
Thank you, Ethan. Questions or comments for Ethan or for anyone else? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to approve the TIP as presented today? Eric Barassa.
Mr. Chair, Eric Barassa, I'll make a motion to approve the 2024 to 2028 TIP as presented today.
Thank you. Leonard Diggins.
I did just second it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Jillian Linnell,
Jillian Linnell, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Amira Patterson,
Amira Patterson, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Matt Moran,
Matt Moran, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Eric Molinari,
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Beck, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And thank you, Ethan. Good job as always. To you and everybody else who helped out. Next item on the agenda, we'll go back to item 8. I don't believe Brian Kane has made it back yet, so I think Eric Barassa has very graciously volunteered to pitch it for Brian. Is that right, Eric?
That is correct. I will give a little bit of an overview, and then I'll pass it to Haral to be able to answer any questions. So the Administration and Finance Committee met this morning. We discussed the proposed state fiscal year 2024 operating budget for CTPS, and we did unanimously support sending it to the full MPO board for approval. The details of the revenue and expenses are in the supporting documents that were posted for this meeting. The expected revenue and expenses for state fiscal year 2024 are $7.85 million. That's about a 13% increase from the current fiscal year that's wrapping up. The primary reason for this increase is the addition of the federal discretionary grant, the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant, which is being budgeted in 2024 for $600,000, and Haral can talk more about that. I think about $400,000 of that is earmarked for consultant support. 75% of the total revenue comes from the MPO's 3C grant, which is the federal formula funds. 25% of the total revenue comes from the MassDOT, MBTA, and other grants. This supports 61 positions, which includes 7 administrative positions. There currently are 11 open positions that staff are recruiting for. This assumes a significant increase also in office maintenance line item to include upgrading the current office space. The projected overhead rate is 120.3% for 2024, compared to 119.34%. So very similar overhead rate. And as I said at the beginning, the A&F committee recommends that the MPO board approve the state fiscal year 2024 budget. And again, I will pass it to Haral to answer any questions.
Thank you, Eric. Are there any questions for either Eric or Haral? Seeing none, with the unanimous recommendation of the A&F committee, can I get a motion in a second to approve the CTPS operating budget for FY24 as presented today? Eric Barassa.
I'll make the motion to approve the state fiscal year 2024 budget.
Thank you. Is there a second? Please state your name for the record. Tom Bent.
Sorry, I'll second that motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Tom. Motion hasn't been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
David Muller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes. Sorry about that.
that's okay. Jillian Linnell,
Jillian Linnell, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Amira Patterson,
Amira Patterson, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Dickens, yes.
Matt Moran,
Matt Moran, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Eric Molinari,
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
O'Rourke, yes.
Okay, motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Haral. Thank you, Eric, for pinch hitting. Next item on the agenda is member items. Are there any at this time? Seeing and hearing none, can I? There's someone named iPhone 2 with your hand up. Do you have a comment or a question, or is that from previous?
Sorry, Mr. Chair. This is Dennis Giambetti. I thought I changed my name to that. But anyways,
No worries.
I just wanted to thank you for scheduling the hybrid in-person meeting, the next meeting. I look forward to seeing all the board members and staff that are going to be attending. I just wanted to thank you for that.
Thanks for the suggestion, Dennis. And you and I should try to actually talk offline about other issues that we haven't had a chance to finalize. Now we can actually see each other in person. So maybe I'll see you over a pastry or something.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah. Any other member items at this time?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. And who's that? State your name.
Eric, that's Eric Barassa.
I knew it was you, Eric. Lynn?
Seconds it. Yes.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. It was a very well run meeting. Good job, staff.